our last lesson of this great Monday. And of course, that is time for writing. But it's an exciting day with writing because we are going to finish our first draft of our narrative story. We wrote the first 2 paragraphs, and today we are going to focus on ending our draft, wrapping up our story, and getting our last paragraph down on paper. So you are going to need your draft that you've already written, so your first 2 paragraphs, and your story map. So you need your story map to show what you've brainstormed in the past, as well as your already written draft. Those first 2 paragraphs, so you can add on to it. Your story map and your story draft. You're going to need both of those today as we're wrapping up our stage of the writing process. Okay, so on this Monday, let's check out our learning target. It says, I can draft the solution of my narrative story with descriptive language. So the very last paragraph today is our solution, our happy ending. How is that problem that we wrote about last week solved? How does our story come to an end? So that will be our final paragraph today, describing the solution to our story, the solution to the problem. And just like the rest of our story, we are focusing on using descriptive language, describing with our words what our story looks like, making a picture with our words. We're not telling, we're showing our reader so they can imagine exactly what our story looks like and what we're trying to say. So our solution with descriptive writing is our goal on this brand new Monday. So, like I said, we're in the last paragraph. We started with our introduction, where we got to meet our character and our setting. Our second paragraph that we just wrote was the problem. What's the challenge that just happened to our character? So today, number 3, we can solve our problem, have a nice solution. That is the last part of our story today. And in our solution paragraph, our reader is going to be able to answer 3 questions. So we need to include 3 different parts in our solution to have a strong, interesting, and exciting ending. So here are the 3 questions any reader who reads your story will be able to clearly answer. First one, how is the problem solved? How is the problem solved? So what did your character do to solve the problem? We'll find that, as well as how does the character feel? Before or during the problem, your character might have felt scared or disappointed or nervous. But now that the problem got solved, how does the character feel now, at this point in the story? Third question, what will the character do next? So even though our story's ending, the problem got solved, so what will your character do with that, because of that? So we're going to end our paragraph with a hopeful note, painting a lovely picture that our character is going to do something next now that the problem is solved. So these are 3 questions, 3 important bits of information everybody's going to make sure they include in their solution paragraph. So, as we're answering these questions, writing down our thoughts, finishing our story, we're of course, just like I said, going to use descriptive language. We're not going to just tell someone what's happening. We're going to show them what happens. Show them with our words so they can see this image. We're painting a picture, being an artist with just our words. So here's an example of how we can take a telling sentence and turn it into a showing sentence with our work. So Super Scholars, my solution was that Mr. Mo, he's going to go to McDonald's to get some more food. So I could write, Mr. Mo went to McDonald's. I told you what Mr. Mo did, but that was it. I just told you what he did, which is pretty boring. I don't want to just tell you. I want to show you what Mr. Mo did. I want you to be able to see Mr. Mo going to McDonald's. And I can do that with my words. So I could change the sentence to say, Mr. Mo frantically sprinted out the door and ran through the neighborhood to grab the missing food. One more time. Mr. Mo frantically sprinted out the door and ran through the neighborhood to grab the missing food. So in this sentence, you can see Mr. Mo going. He's frantically sprinting out the door. He ran through the neighborhood. You can see the actions. You can feel him as he's running to go to McDonald's. And these showing sentences, they're way more interesting and fun to read. So even though we can just tell events in our story, we want to show our character moving and making decisions with our words. Okay, we're going to take this descriptive knowledge with us, our goal of showing, and start getting ready to draft our paragraph. So, just like last week, to get our ideas flowing, you need your conversation buddy, because we're going to talk to them for just a second to get our ideas flowing. You got them out? It's okay if you have to go grab them. You can come back real quick. So, today, you are going to pause the video and get your ideas going and talk to your buddy about these two questions. Number 1, how is your character feeling after solving the problem? You already brainstormed on your story map how your character solved the problem, but how are they feeling? Talk about it to your buddy. How are they feeling? And how would you know, how would you see what they're feeling? And number 2, what will your character do next? Now that the problem is solved, your character has changed their feeling. What are they going to do next? So this is what you'll talk about with your buddy. So, Mr. Mo, I know that you just went to McDonald's and you solved the problem. So I think you're feeling pretty calm now. Your nerves have gone away. You're feeling really good and happy. That's how you're feeling after solving the problem. And then, Mr. Mo, what you're going to do next is you're going to bring that food back and share it with everybody. You solved the problem, got the food, but next you're going to bring it back and share it with your entire family. So that is my brainstorm of what you're going to do in my story. Okay, 2nd grade, you're going to do just that with your buddy. Answer these questions. How's your character feeling? What they're going to do next. Talk out loud, discuss it with your buddy, and then come on back. Okay, pause. Okay, how was your conversation with your buddy? I hope you got your ideas flowing and you're ready to start drafting real soon. But we're going to give ourselves a break first before I show us how I'm going to end our story. So come on, stand up with me, our last this or that of the day. Okay, so which one of these would you rather do? Would you rather be a race car driver? If so, you're going to fly like a plane. Or would you rather be a circus performer? If so, you're going to swim like a fish. So again, we're choosing what kind of job we want. Maybe a race car driver or a circus performer. What do you think? What would you prefer? I think it would be cool to be a race car driver. So I'm going to fly like a plane for 5 seconds. Are you ready? Last time, here we go. And 1, 2, 3, has landed, and we are ready to start drafting the end of my story. So, second grade, before I start to draft the very end of my story, the solution paragraph, I want to go back and read what I already wrote. Because like any story, we want to make sure it flows, it all connects. So I want to remind ourselves of what I already wrote so I can continue connecting it in my final paragraph. Okay, so this was the introduction. Let's read and remember what I wrote. It says, Mr. Mo was a helpful monster who lived in the quiet town of Monsterville. He was a blue fluffy monster who loved to smile his crooked smile. But most of all, Mr. Mo loved to cook for his big, crazy family. But here is my problem paragraph. Let's see what I wrote. One night, Mr. Mo was preparing his famous creamy mac and cheese for the family feast. Mr. Mo had been working so hard to cook all day, but when he finished, Mr. Mo realized it was not enough food. He took a deep breath and dropped his shoulders in disappointment. Then, Mr. Mo began looking around the kitchen to find any leftover food he could use. Okay, so we left off in the story by writing how Mr. Mo was trying to solve the problem. He was trying to look for food. But let's now start writing the solution, how Mr. Mo solves this cooking crisis. Okay, so like I said, Mr. Mo right now is looking all over the kitchen. So that's where I want to start the story. So I'm going to say, Mr. Mo looked all over the kitchen. That's what he was doing. He looked all over the kitchen, but that didn't work. That isn't how he solved the problem. But he had no luck. So looking over the kitchen didn't work. But then a bright idea popped into Mr. Mo's head. So I'm including this then part to show that the story's changing. There's a happy ending that's coming. Mr. Mo looked all over the kitchen, but he had no luck. Then a bright idea popped into his head. And I made sure to say bright idea. Describe the idea. He frantically, here's my show sentence, he frantically sprinted out the door and ran through the neighborhood So he frantically sprinted out the door and he ran through the neighborhood. So I'm showing how he ran, where he was going. Through the neighborhood to grab extra food at McDonald's. So I now named how Mr. Mo solved the problem. He frantically sprinted out the door and ran through the neighborhood to grab extra food at McDonald's. That is the solution to my story, and I clearly named it and was being descriptive. So, now that he's solved the problem, how did Mr. Mo feel about it? He felt calm. He was able to breathe again. So I can show that by saying, Mr. Mo was able to finally catch his breath and feel to show that Mr. Mo was calming down, he was breathing again, I made sure to say and show that Mr. Mo caught his breath. He was able to catch his breath. So I have how Mr. Mo solved the problem, how he feels. Now, to wrap up my story, after this happy ending, I want to explain what Mr. Mo is going to do next. Now that he's got McDonald's, he solved his problem, he caught his breath, what is he going to do next? So at the end of the story, finally, Mr. Mo brought the food back to his family and they ate happily all together. The end. Once Mr. Mo solved the problem, he brought it back and they ate happily all together again. There we go. In my solution paragraph, I was able to wrap up the story showing what Mr. Mo was doing to solve the problem, how he felt about it, and what his next steps were. Let's go over. I want to reread my writing to make sure it says what I want it to, and it all makes sense as one paragraph about the solution of my story. Okay, from the top, it says, Mr. Mo looked all over the kitchen, but he had no luck. Then a bright idea popped into Mr. Mo's head. He frantically sprinted out the door and ran through the neighborhood to grab extra food at McDonald's. Mr. Mo was able to finally catch his breath and feel calm. Finally, Mr. Mo brought the food back to his family and they ate happily all together. Woo! After I read, I checked all my work, I am happy with where my first draft of my paragraph is. So now, Super Scholars, now that we've seen how we're wrapping up our story, you're going to take this example, these awesome descriptive skills, and go back to your draft of your narrative story and start to write the conclusion, your solution paragraph. And as you're writing this last paragraph of your first draft, remember, these are the 3 questions you need to answer and clearly state in your paragraph. So as a reminder, how is the problem solved? That's already on your plot map, what you already brainstormed. How is the problem solved? How does the character feel? This is what you talked about with your buddy. How does the character feel? And what will the character do next? You talked about this with your buddy too. What is next for your character? So continuing on that draft you already wrote, skip a couple lines or on the back, you're going to write your last and final paragraph of this first draft, answering all these questions. Okay, 2nd grade, we've had a great start to our drafting, so I want you to show me with all your words, show me how your story comes to an end and what is next for your character. Take it slow, reread your work, and I can't wait to see how your stories